new Gemara talking about using boards for schach. But actually, we should just mention the last piece of the previous Gemara. Should just go over that little piece of the previous Gemara, where the Gemara talked about the fact that the Sukkim used the same word eser, which we were talking about in our Gemara as a pitchfork, but there are Sukkim that mention that word to mean tefillah, to mean davening. So Rabbi Elazar says, why are the tefillos of tzaddikim similar to a pitchfork? And he answers, that the pitchfork, it moves the grain from one place to another in the threshing, by the threshing floor. So also the tefillos of tzaddikim, they change Hashem's opinion from midas achzarios to midas rachmanos, from a element of cruelty, a trait of cruelty, to a trait of mercifulness. And we explained yesterday that it does seem a little surprising. He uses such a harsh term, midas achzarios, and I think David had showed us a little insight into it about how to explain it, that it's maybe not as doesn't necessarily mean to say such a thing about Hashem. I forgot already. David, what was the main point of the insight from yesterday?
I'm not sure.
Oh. I have to remember now. What was the vart? Why is it not such a harsh type of thing from Achzarios?
Some of the texts don't have that word. They have.
Oh, right. Well, that we also said, right? That thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, that's true. We did say that there are some texts that don't use that word, and then we said that Rashi brings the pasuk of Yitzchok, where it says Vayetar al Hashem, even though there are other psukim. We spoke about that as well. Like, why does it pick this pasuk and not the pasuk of Vayetar, where Moshe speaks to Hashem, davens to Hashem about the plagues. And I had mentioned that maybe it has something to do with the fact that it's that Yitzchok was supposed to be the leader of Klal Yisrael, and here he's not going to have a future. And additionally, the pain of not having children is an excruciating pain. But David did have some insight over there that he brought up from one of the later Sfarim. The other thing, if you find it, David, you can remind us of it. The other thing that I was going to mention is the famous question, philosophical question about, in general, do we how can we understand the wording of this Gemara where it says that you sort of change Hashem from the midas achzarios to a midas rachmanos? How is it possible to change? It says Ani Hashem.
I found it.
Found it? Okay. You want to just read it to us?
Yeah. Want me to share screen?
Either way, if you want to read it or share screen, whatever's easier.
Yeah. The commentaries are surprised by the use of this.
Yeah, good.
Okay, the commentaries were surprised by the use of this unusually harsh expression. The typical phrase is the attribute of justice. They noted, however, that in this case, the attribute of justice was not at work, as Yitzchok and Rivka did nothing to warrant being childless. Rather, the attribute here is understood in the sense of afflictions imposed out of love. The use of the harsh expression serves to underscore that it is within the power of the righteous to overcome even that attribute through prayer. See Rishon LeZion, Nezer HaKodesh, and others.
Shkoyach. Okay. So I guess the point of that is that achzarios is where Hashem would punish someone even if they totally don't deserve it. It's called Yisurim Shalava. So the term achzarios is used in such a scenario where someone doesn't really deserve it, and they're just getting, as a means of getting closer to Hashem, they are receiving some type of a punishment, and that's in the Gemara terms called achzariyos, and that's why it uses such a harsh term. And then the power of a tzaddik to be able to change over from such a midah is also impressive, and that's why the Gemara brings from this specific case of Eser, I guess, because it could have brought from other sources, other places where it uses that word, but that would be this allows it to use the term achzarios, and it further shows the greatness of tzaddikim. But I was mentioning that in addition to all to these insights, there is another question on this on this Gemara from another angle, and that is that Ani Hashem lo shinesi, it says, I Hashem never change. So how does that work with our davening, that we can get Hashem, so to speak, to change? And how does that work with the wording over here, where it says a tzaddik can just change Hashem from midas achzariyos to midas rachmanas? I thought Hashem never changes.
Oh boy.
But that gets really philosophical. On a very simple, Jeffrey, yes.
I don't think that means the same category. It means his outlook or his power doesn't change. It doesn't mean that he can't do a different result. So it all says, just use a different word. With Moshe, it says, Vayinochem Hashem al hara asher, right? He I don't know how you want to change it. It doesn't say change, Vayinochem. He decided not to, something like
retracted,
that.
Retracted. It sort of changes. Yeah, sounds similar.
Yeah. So I've heard from my rabbis that it's not the Hashem that changes; it's the person who prays. The person who prays is no longer the same person who deserved that judgment. Now that they prayed, they became a different person. So now they're getting a different judgment. It's not Hashem changing. The person who's changing. Being
right. So this is one of very good, Victor. Yeah, that's one of the famous answers. And Shkoyach, Jeffrey, you gotta, it's not the question is not the strongest question, I must say, but yeah, this is a good vart, Victor, and the concept of Hashem, it's not that Hashem is changing like Hashem changes. It's that Hashem can offer, Hashem can provide remove a punishment, so to speak. Remove punishment doesn't mean he's changing. Or in other words, Hashem, part of his punishment was if the person repents or prays, I'll take it away. In other words, that was the initial part of the initial plan. It's not like you changed it. It's just that the part of the initial plan is that the person, if a tzaddik davens to me, then I'll follow what the tzaddik says. That's all part of the that's part of the plan. So there are different ways, different ways of answering it, but it's a nice vart, Victor, that I've heard before. Yeah. Yes, Ezra.
Question. Okay, so the individual has done something wrong. Hashem is going to punish him. We're following the line of the people who are discussing this right here. So the individual davens with all his heart, whatever you say now, he's changed as an individual. So fine. So he's no longer the guy that was before. So you shouldn't be punishing the new individual since he hasn't done anything wrong.
Right. That's the point. That Hashem is. That's exactly what he's saying. That Hashem will take away the punishment, even though Hashem doesn't change. So how does he take away the punishment? The answer is it's a different person. But that punishment
is still hanging there.
Right, except that the angels can't find the guy who they're supposed to do the punishment to, so it just hangs. You know what I mean? In other words, that punishment is meant for that person if they ever find such a person, but that person no longer exists.
Maybe that's related to a person having a name change when they're ill.
Right. It definitely is the same idea. It's a similar idea. There was a judgment against that person, but now this is a different person. Now, it doesn't mean that if for whatever reason there can't be another judgment about the new person, but there's potential for that new judgment to be more positive.
So I also heard, this is even more philosophical, from another rabbi was teaching, that that the punishment gets redirected. So like when Pinchas did his act, the punishment went to the Midyanim instead. It was originally on the Jewish people. So now you have this hanging punishment, and it's like it doesn't know what to do, like doesn't know where to go. So it has to goes
right.
somewhere
Well, there
else.
are scenarios, right? There are psukim that imply that. There are verses in the Torah, there are psukim that imply that idea that what I was planning to do to you, I will do to them. There are such psukim. If you don't get rid of the idol worship in your midst, things like that. Yeah. And so that idea is also correct, but I don't know if it has to be that way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if just because there is no one to receive the punishment, so does that mean that it's going to have to go back to the first person? If we don't find someone who deserves that one, that punishment, I don't know if it has to be that way, but there are cases like that. Yeah. Yes, Jeffrey.
So Hashem tells Moshe, when there is a bad situation with people of Israel, you should recite these lines.
Okay. Right.
El Rachim V'Chanun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a purpose to that.
Okay.
Right.
So,
right.
So
in other words,
we don't interpret those lines as being the idea of Moshe.
Sure.
Rather that he was advised in the future to use it, and so he does in Bimidbar with this story of the spies.
Right. So in other words, it's part of the plan in the first place. It's like the Hashem Kaveh. Like, in other words, it's even before Hashem made the punishment. He already said that there are words that you could say that will take away and stop. So sometimes we'll remove the anger of Hashem, or we'll always remove the anger of Hashem. Yeah. Anyway, interesting question and discussion. Okay, shkoyach. Now we're up to the next Mishnah, and we've talked about what we did a little piece of the Gemara already. So the Mishnah had mentioned about Nesarim. These are like boards that you're using for schach. I mentioned to you that there seems to be a little issue because nowadays we do use boards for our roof, and the boards that we use are not necessarily 2x12s like it sounds like from the Gemara. I'm surprised they had these such wide pieces of well, I guess they used thin wood. I guess thin wood. Maybe they used a 1x12 or something. I guess it was just like a board, or even less than anyway. But the point is that we use wood for our roofs. What would be the law of using those? Like people use 2x4s, 2x6s. I've seen many roofs with many roofs in the roof in my house. I think they're probably 2x4s or 2x6s as the roof. So would that be included? Would that be a problem to use for schach? Could you use 2x4s for schach? So it seems to be a discussion, a debate among the later rabbis about using the 2x4s. Would that be a easy way of doing schach? And one of the problems with it is that it's similar to a roof, very similar to a roof of a house. I see the Mishabura, he brings down that, it's in the Shulchan Aruch, it brings down, Nohagu shaloy l'sachech bahem klal. Now the minhag is not to use at all these nesarim, these boards. Now the Shulchan Aruch talks about using boards that have four hand breadths, even if you stick them on the side. And if they don't have 4 hand breadths, they would be kosher, even if they're meshupim, like smoothened. But the minhag is not to be mesachech with them at all, because the Mishabura says the reason for that would be maybe you're going to use them for schach in a way that the rain can't even fall through. And some of the Achronim write that nowadays it would be prohibited midina. It's not just a minhag, but a halacha, since nowadays we roof our houses with nesarim she'ein behen dalet tfachim. That's the way our houses have a roof, is with these type of boards that don't have 4 handbreadths. And they're not 2x6, 2x12s, they're less. So, and they're smaller, and that's how we roof our houses. So Ika Gzeras Tikra, there is a decree of it being similar to a roof of a house. Anyway, so that's the Mishnah Berurah's mention that there might be there is reason, there are 2 reasons why maybe a person shouldn't use this. I must say that there still is a question. What about using a 1x4, 1x2, smaller ones that are not used for roofs? That would be an interesting question. How small do you have to be machmir? Do you still have to worry that maybe someone will make it in a way that the rain can't fall in?
Sure, if you don't put space in between, you still need to have the sunshine also.
In other words, it's more like a gzeira that you might end up doing it in a way, or gzeira that maybe you'll come to be masachich in a way that the rain can't fall in. But I'm not doing it that way. But still, the minhag is not to do it because I guess we're afraid someone's going to not know and do it too tight, put them too tight together. So it deserves to be looked into more, but that's seems to be one of the discussions here. I do know a knowledgeable rabbi here in Florida that does use like tiny boards for his schach. So, and I once saw it in Providence as well, another rabbi over there doing it. So there definitely is room to be lenient, I guess, with these. Again, it's not 2x4s. We're using maybe 1x2s or something like that, or some smaller things. Anyway, our Mishnah talks about using nasarim, using boards, and we have a machlekes in the Mishnah, and then the Gemara has another machlekes. What is the machlekes of the Mishnah about? So it's really there's an argument, and then there's a question of what is that argument on. So the Mishnah's argument is that Reb Yehuda says you are allowed to use boards, and Reb Meir says you're not allowed to use boards. And of course, the Gemara will discuss what size boards. What are we referring to? Now, before we get to the Gemara, the Mishnah picks a case which also leaves it a little vague because different ways of understanding what the case is. But the simple reading of it is that you put a board that's 4 handbreadths wide, and it's going to be kosher as long as you don't sleep under it. So that's what the Mishnah says. The simple understanding of it is that it's going to be on the side of your sukkah, so it would fall under the category of doifen akuma. And so this board that's 4 handbreadths wide, you're gonna have as part of your roofing of your sukkah, and the sukkah will be kosher as long as you don't sleep under it, which makes it sound like it's not a kosher schach, but it's kosher valid. The sukkah is still valid. Sheira, the sukkah is valid. You can't sleep under it, and which we explained meant also you can't eat under it, except that eating, you could theoretically eat under it if it's not a meal. You're just eating shahakol or eating some other, something small. So you're drinking under it. So the Mishnah just picked a case of sleeping because that's more like a absolute type of rule that you can never sleep under. But it sounds like a neser that's a board that's 4 handbreadths wide is going to be hasel schach. That's what you sort of see from this second half of the Mishnah, where you can't sleep under it. Why can't you sleep under it? So it gives us a little measurement there about 4 handbreadths. That 4 handbreadths seems to be an important measurement here with regard to eating or sleeping under this area. Okay, then the Gemara said that maybe let's read the Gemara inside. Let's start from the Gemara then, even though we did a little piece of this. Amar Rav. We're on page 14a, Yudalit Amad Aleph, 14a. and right by the Gimel Mem, the big letters, Gimel Mem. It's about 20 lines up from the bottom of the page, probably less. Let's see, 5, maybe about 16 lines from the bottom of the page. 14a. Gemara. Amar Rav. So Rav, throughout the Gemara, you always have arguments between Rav and Shmuel. So here again, we have Rav and Shmuel. Amar Rav, Rav says that what is this argument in the Mishnah between Reb Yehuda and Reb Meir? Reb Yehuda is more lenient. Reb Meir is more strict. He oiser. Reb Meir says you can't use these nasarim. And Reb Yehuda said you can. What is that argument about? Amar Rav. Rav says machlokes is benasarim sheish behen arba. Talking about boards that do have 4 handbreadths. The Reb Meir is like Zeras Tikra. Reb Meir holds that there is a Zera, the decree about Tikra, about a roof. And if we allow you to use these, you're going to think that it's the same as the roof of your house. And that is for sure invalid. You can't use your house that you use year round. And therefore, we have to make a Gzeira. That's Reb Meir's reason. It's similar to your house. So if it has 4 handbreadths, we're going to say you can't use those type of boards for schach. Now, Reb Meir holds of this Gzeira. Now, Reb Yehuda says it's permissible. Reb Yehuda, less like Zeras Tikra, Reb Yehuda doesn't hold of this Gzeira of that it's similar to the roofing of a house. And Tikra is the roof of a house. So it's the Reb Yehuda doesn't hold of this. He's not worried about this. Now, what about if they're less than the size of 4 handbreadths? Aval bin asarim shein bahen arba. If they're boards that don't have 4 handbreadths width to them, everyone would hold that it's kosher because you're not going to compare this to your house. And you're not going to say, "Oh, I could. What's wrong with my house? My house just has wood as a roof. Why can't I just sit in my house? My house is a perfect sukkah, right? Let me just sit. So the thing is that Rabbi Yehuda is not worried even if it's 4 tefachim. He says it's not similar to, I'm not worried people are going to make such a mistake. But Reb Meir says I am worried, but only if they're 4 handbreadths. They're less than 4 handbreadths. Who's using that for their roof? I guess in the older days they had the roofs. They had much bigger boards they would put for their roof, and therefore, it's everyone would agree it's kshera. It is a kosher sukkah. It's kosher for schach. Okay, now that's the opinion of Rav. Now comes Shmuel. Shmuel says b'she'ein behen arba. It's the argument is b'she'ein behen arba machlokes. That's what the argument is when they don't have 4 handbreadths. That Reb Meir is machmir and Reb Yehuda is mekel. Machmir means strict. Reb Yehuda is mekel, lenient. And yesh bahen arba, if it has 4 handbreadths, divrei hakol psula, everyone would agree that it's invalid. Now, if you look at the Mishnah, it would seem that the Mishnah is sort of like hinting to this idea that if it's 4 handbreadths, there's a problem. You can't sit under it, right? So you can't sleep under it. It does seem from the Mishnah maybe like a little hint, and we'll see in the Gemara that's Gemara tries to use that. Tries to use that case. But anyway, Shmuel is of the opinion that anything that's above 4, everyone agrees is a problem. It's when it's less than 4, that's when you have less than 4 handbreadths. So which basically means about 12 inches, a little more than 12 inches. Now, the Gemara is a little bothered with this because the Gemara says, so what are you going to use? All sticks and reeds, and they're all less than 4 handbreadths. So you're going to say you can't use them. So what are you going to use for schach? Everything. What are you going to use? If it's more than 4 handbreadths, for sure you can't use it. If it's less than 4 handbreadths, according to the opinion of Reb Meir, you can't use it. Right? This is the way. So what can you use? Well, according to Reb Meir, what do you use? So the Gemara says, "Ein ben arba va'afilu pachas mishleisha." Even if it's less than 3, it doesn't have 4 handbreadths. Even less than 3 handbreadths also is going to be a problem. Hakanim be'alma ninu. These are simple reeds or sticks. How do you yeah? What are you gonna use for schach? This is the typical schach. These must be kosher. This is what the Torah says to use. The Torah says you got to use the psilas dogon v'yakev, the straw and the branches. That's what it tells you to use for schach. So what are you going to do? Prohibit even less than 3? So Rav Papa says no. We have to explain what Shmuel is saying, and now. Until now, what we've assumed was this is something it's all about being similar to a house. But now we actually, because we're explaining the law that if it's less than 3, it's not a problem. If it's more than 4, it definitely is a problem. In between 3 to 4, that's where there's a machlokes. So the Gemara has to come up with reasons. Now a new reason. Why are these numbers the main numbers? So Amar Rav Papa Hachikama. Rav Papa says this is what Shmuel means to say. This is what he said. Hachikama. Yesh ben arba, if it has 4 hand breadths, divrei hakoil psula, everyone agrees it's invalid. Everyone agrees it's invalid. Once it's 4, that's it. Palchas mishloisha, if it's less than 3 hand breadths wide, divrei hakol ksheira, everyone would agree it's kosher, which basically would mean anything that's 2 by less than a 2 by 10 would be kosher. It's less than 3 hand breadths. 3 hand breadths is approximately 9 inches. So anything that's 2 by 8, 2 by 6, a 2 by 4, 2 by 2, all these would be kosher for schach according to everyone. It's Palchas Mishloisha is Divrei HaKol Ksheira. My time, what would the reason be?
Rabbi, why are you saying 2 by?
The typical. I'm just giving an example of the typical.
Those are rather thick. Those are rather thick boards, thick planks,
okay.
or thick pieces of wood. I would think maybe less than that might be more representative of schach.
Okay, I would just picking those because just when you go to Home Depot, it's the easiest, the most common wood that they have there is 2 by 4s, and then comes 2 by 6s, and then but okay, yeah, we could fine, that's fine. So anything less than 3 hand breadths would be kosher, and the reason is the Gemara says my taima kanim bialmanin. It's because these are regular branches, reeds. These are regular reeds and sticks. These are regular things for use. It's less than 3 hand breadths, so that's for sure kosher. Ki pligi, when do they argue? Mishloisha adarba. So anything that's between 3 hand breadths and 4 hand breadths, 9 inches and 12 inches, that would be the width where they're arguing about. Mar Savar, master holds Kivan Delesnu Shir Makon, since it doesn't have a measurement of a domain, because it's less than 4 Loi Gazrinon, we do not make a gzeira of tikra that it's similar to a roof. In other words, this entity, this item that's less than 4 hand breadths, so it doesn't have a shear, a measurement of a domain, and it's not called a reshus, not called a domain less than 4. So we do not make a gzeira that it's similar to a roof, and it's not important enough to make a roof from it. And therefore, Reb Yehuda says that we are not going to prohibit it. It's less than 4 hand breadths. Now, Umar Savar and Master holds, which is Rebeir, Kivan Nanafki Lahu Miteiras Lavud, that since it's more than the measurement of Lavud, Lavud means it's one, we consider anything that's Lavud that's within 3 hand breadths to be attached. And this being that it's bigger than the amount of the measurement, the halachic rule of lavud, so therefore he says that we are going to consider it significant because it doesn't fall into the category of lavud. So it means it has some type of significance of an entity. And therefore, we will say it's similar to a tikra, a roof, and we will make a gzeira. So basically, Rav Papa adds in these seemingly halachic, not necessarily connected halachic rules, but just some halachic rulings as to the numbers. Why is 4 an important number? Why is 3 an important number? 3 is a love is beyond lavud, and 4 is a domain of its own because something that's in between 3 and 4. So it did leave, on the one hand, it left the domain of lavud, and therefore less the rulings of lavud, and therefore it means it has some type of a entity of its own. On the other hand, it's still not a domain of its own because 4 tfachim, 4 handbreadths, make something a domain. So therefore, there's room to say that maybe we shouldn't make it to make a big deal out of this board that's over 3 handbreadths. On the other hand, maybe we should not make a big deal out of it. It's not so significant. It's not even a domain. So therefore, you have an argument in the Mishnah, Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Reb Meir is more strict. Reb Yehuda is more lenient. And this is a board that's between 3 and 4. Once it reaches the size of 4 handbreadths, it's going to be invalid according to Shmuel, according to everyone. So the way Shmuel sees it, it'll be according to everyone. Now, if you go back to Rav held that the argument is above 4 handbreadths, but less than 4 handbreadths, everyone agrees is kosher.
Rabbi.
Yes. Well, one second. I think Jeffrey had his hand up. Yeah, Jeffrey.
Okay, so but aren't they saying that if there's a gap in the schach on the edge of your sukkah and it's only 3 handbreadths, then you don't have to put any cover there. The point is that gap is allowed, and especially on the edge where things could fall off, be blown off more easily. So you could redistribute the rest of what you had a little bit, and so there's no reason to put something there if the gap is small.
I don't think that we're talking about the side of the sukkah at this point. There was a case that we spoke about the side of the sukkah in the Mishnah, but here we are talking about using your schach for the entire sukkah. And at this point, the Gemara is talking about you use these boards for your entire sukkah. According to Rav, if they're less than 4 handbreadths, even more than 3, everyone would agree that you can even use them to use for your entire sukkah for stuff. So we're not really at this point talking about the side. Well, we'll see. It does get a little confusing soon, but
okay.
Do you see it differently in that now we're
even if it's in the middle?
Okay.
Even if it's in the middle, if there's a gap of 3 or less, there's not a problem. So I think that's why
if there's less than 3, not or less. If there's less than 3, a gap of less than 3, right, of air, so it won't ruin your sukkah.
Then it's like lavud.
Right.
So
saying that.
So I think that they're condensing the discussion to the case of like one gap rather than doing the whole. They're looking at the extremes. So one extreme is 4, definitely can't use it. But the other extreme is, what if I have 3, a gap of 3, as much as 3, you don't have to cover it, even if it's in the middle. So you could redistribute, you push everything a little bit. So let's only discuss what will you do with the size between 3 and 4.
Okay, good point. In other words, what the Gemara means here with lavud is to emphasize that that you have this board that's more than 3 handbreadths. That board is going to be considered significant because it's going to be similar to a roof. Why is Reb Meir holding that it's similar to a roof? Again, we're discussing Shmuel's understanding, and Shmuel's understanding is that that Reb Meir would hold that if it's 3 handbreadths, it would be a problem. Why are we now going to say it's a problem because it's more than 3 handbreadths? And okay, so it goes beyond lavud. What does it really mean that it doesn't fall into the category of lavud because it's 3 handbreadths or more, and that means it's no longer lavud? Because if it was less than 3 handbreadths, we're not going to make it similar to a roof because it would be kosher even if it's not there. So the only problem would be a board that's more than 3 handbreadths that we're going to say is going to be similar to love. We're going to say it's similar to a roof because here we can't look at it anymore like love it. You can't look at it. Very good point. Good way of explaining it, Jeffrey. So here you can't look at it anymore like if it was empty space, if it was less than 3 handbreadths, we could look at it as love it and say it's considered like a good roof even without this piece possibly, it's not so necessary. Now, the only thing you have to work out is that without this piece, you can't always say love it. If there's too little schach on the sukkah, the only negative, that's the only problem with this little point that you're mentioning, that in other words it's not always going to work, but I guess it could work with in other words lavud could be a means of making this kosher, that even if this piece of wood wouldn't be here, it would work. If it's less than 3 handbreadths, it would be kosher with lavud as long as the rest of the sukkah has a majority schach. But if you need this part to be schach, in order to make majority shade, that could be problematic. But nevertheless, the concept is still there.
Then they tell you can't eat under it. You can't sleep under it. So I always imagine
even the whole sukkah. I'm saying even the whole sukkah you wouldn't be able to eat under it, to see, because the whole sukkah doesn't have majority shade. But nevertheless, the concept is the Gemara is just making a point from this concept of lavud, that lavud would theoretically be a reason why this board is not a problem to your sukkah, because even empty space theoretically would be okay. But we're going to make a gzeira if it's more than 3. More than 3 is where we're going to make a gzeira. Okay.
Thank you.
Good point, Jeffrey. Yeah. David, you want to say something?
Yeah, this decree, there's a big note over here. I don't know how it's long for me to share it, but I mean, if I'd share it, then you could look at it, but I don't want to read it. Can I share it?
Yeah, okay. The decree with regard to boards. That's the one. According to Rashi and others, a ceiling usually consists of boards 4 handbreadths wide, and that is the reason for the decree prohibiting their use, but not the use of narrower boards. Many early authorities question this approach based on 2 issues. First, during Talmudic times, roofs were made of narrower boards. Second, the language of the Gemara itself indicates that the significance of a board is determined by its size, not by its potential use in a ceiling. The language of the Gemara itself indicates that the significance of a board is determined by its size, not by its potential use in a ceiling. Consequently, they explain the sages distinguish between roofing that looks like a regular ceiling because it is made with wide boards, and roofing that is fit for roofing for a sukkah. It is written in the Jerusalem Talmud that this decree is part of the general decree against using vessels And although these boards are flat wood pieces, cannot become ritually impure, the sages issued a decree prohibiting their use because they resemble vessels in a sense that they are finished products. Okay, so in other words, there's an alternative pshat here, which is based on the Ritva and the Ran. Maybe we'll talk about it another day. But the way we're learning is Rashi's pshat, and that's the simpler understanding. And generally, I wait a day or two to go into the Rishonim. But I'd like to get the Gemara clear and one according to Rashi's pshat. Maybe we'll touch upon them and see how they develop into halacha. Maybe tomorrow. Okay, so in any event, the way we're explaining the Gemara is that it's very similar to a roof in the times of the Gemara, and this would be the issue that is mentioned in our Mishnah is basically, do we make this gzeira? And what we've now seen in Rav Papa is it has a little to do with, or a lot to do with the rule of lavud and the rule of a domain. 3 handbreadths, 4 handbreadths, so on. Okay, now the Gemara asks questions on these opinions. So the first question is a question on Rav, and the second one is also going to be a question that we're going to ask on Rav. So on, we're gonna see the Gemara is trying to prove which opinion is correct. It's going to also bring later on some proofs to Shmuel and so on. Anyway, let's begin. So Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Nasan Aleha Neser. If you put on the Sukkah a board, Shuhu Rachav Arba Tvachim, that it's 4 handbreadths wide. And we know that this is, the Sukkah is going to be, the Mishnah said it's Kshera, the Sukkah is kosher, but as long as you don't sleep under the Sukkah, under not the Sukkah, under this board, because this board is too big, it's 4 handbreadths. And the Gemara says, who does how do you learn this case? So Bishlam el Shmuel, it goes good according to Shmuel, that the Amar that says b'she'ein behen arba, that the machlokes is b'she'ein behen arba machlokes, when you don't have 4, it's the argument that the argument between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is less than 4, but once it has 4, everyone agrees. About yesh ben arba divrei kol psul, everyone agrees it's puzzle. So mishum hachid lo yishon tachtav, that would be a reason not to sleep under it. Now, why is the sukkah kosher then if you have a board that's over 4 handbreadths wide? Everyone agrees that you can't sleep under it, but why is the sukkah kosher? And the answer is because we're talking about it's on the side. It's on the side of the sukkah, so the sukkah is not going to be invalidated from it because we have a rule of Teif and Akuma. But nevertheless, you cannot sleep under that board.
We're also imagining a sukkah with 4 sides, I think. So that means that you have a sukkah with 3 sides. So it's perfectly okay. Because that's talking about putting 1 board on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what you just said. So
if someone's putting, just to give the example, if someone's putting 1 board on.
Okay, and it's on the,
so if you put
it's
one
on the side
board
or on the middle?
side, I still have
the
3.
side.
I'm not going to sleep under because I still have a sukkah with 3 sides. The ideal sukkah is 3 sides more, and the rest of the kosher has kosher schach.
You're saying the case could theoretically be talking about it's even in the middle. Even if this board was in the middle, the sukkah could still be kosher on the other sides of it. Right. Yeah, theoretically you could say that. The only thing, right. You could say that it's a kosher, it's kshera, the sukkah is kosher. The only thing would be that you would really want to say they are kosher sukkahs, and this is like a separate sukkah. You have this beam in the middle, a board in the middle.
Yes.
Non-kosher. Yeah. So you got a sukkah on the right side and a sukkah on the left side that are kosher sukkahs. But the wording of the Mishnah just says kshera, sounds like the sukkah is kosher, but this piece is not kosher to sleep under. So because of that, it seems that maybe that's why they translate it to mean on the side. But it's a good point. You came up with a scenario where you could theoretically, you could say that it's talking about in the middle. Yes, Moshe.
Rabbi, what about, I've seen sukkahs that have beams, 4x4 beams that go across the top.
Yeah. That's things that the schach is being held on. But that's not.
You can't sleep on. You can't sleep under those beams.
Oh, so you haven't seen. You've seen our 2x4s, right?
No,
Or
I've seen
2x4s.
4x4s. 4x4s.
4x4s on top as schach.
Not as beams. Beams.
You've seen 4x4 beams holding up the schach.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
4x4 beams means 4 inches by 4 inches, which is not exactly true. It's really 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Our Gemara is talking about 4 hand breadths width, which means 12 inches. And I'm sure you have not seen 12 by 12s.
No.
I don't think they make them. But so basically it's just a confusion of the word 4 by you're talking 4 inches, and which really isn't even true. Whenever they say 2x4, it really means 2 by 3.5 or 1.5 by 3.5. But
even the 2 isn't 2. It's like 1
2, right? Yeah,
7/8 or something. I don't know. 1 3/4.
Right, correct. So bottom line is what we're confusing is the 4 inches versus 4 hand breadths. Oh, sure. All right. So basically, it's not a problem. This is what's holding up the schach, and it's not going to ruin the sukkah. It's kosher. It's actually a kosher, theoretically kosher schach. It's just as we see in our Gemara, it's an issue of a gzeira, a decree, that's similar to a roof, or
because it's finished off.
So it's really kosher schach theoretically. What is that? If it was finished off, if it's finished off, that could be problematic. If it's finished off, meaning if it's made into a vessel or something like that. But on its own, it's not essentially invalid for schach. It's in essence, it's kosher for schach anyway. So it's holding up your schach. So we try to be machmir that things that are holding up your schach should be kosher for schach. So these, you could use 2x4s to hold up your schach, but to use it for actual schach, that would be an issue that we're dealing with here about using boards for schach. Okay, so
Rabbi, you were saying about Daifin Akuma?
Yeah, that the case that we're talking about here.
Translate that again.
It's a bent wall that if you have on the side of your sukkah an item that's maybe not perfect for schach, either biblically or rabbinically, however, whatever the issue is, but if it's on the side of the sukkah, it does not invalidate your sukkah, even if it's up to 4 cubits, which is a huge size. So that's like 6 feet. You could have like an overhang from a house, could be hanging over your sukkah. It would not invalidate your sukkah, because we'll look at your sukkah as if it has a wall that is bent. And
but you don't want to be sitting under that.
Right, so you can't sit under it, but it won't ruin your sukkah, and you could still consider your sukkah to have the 3 walls and use that as a wall for your sukkah. Okay, so here the Gemara says that this goes well according to Shmuel, that says that the argument is when you don't have 4 hand breadths, 4 boards with 4 hand breadths, that's where they argue. But if it has 4 hand breadths, it's for sure puzzle, it's invalid. So Mishum Hachi, because of that, Lo Yishon Tachtov, you would not be allowed to sit or sleep, I should say, under this board. And because it has 4 hand breadths. Once it has 4 hand breadths, you reach the threshold that you no longer, that it's not kosher according to anyone. Elo l'Rav, but according to Rav, the Amar that says V'sheish ben Arba Machlekes, that the argument applies when the board has 4 hand breadths. According to that view, that there's an argument then. Aval ein ben Arba deber kol kshera, less than 4, everyone agrees is kosher, but above 4, there's an argument. So the question would be, Rabbi Yehuda, according to the lenient view, Rabbi Yehuda, amai lo yishon tachta, why can't you sleep under that board? we just said that that's where the machlokes is. That's where the argument is. And according to one opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, you would be allowed. You should be allowed to sleep under. And why would the Mishnah make a sort of like a blanket statement, like just a anonymous statement that like almost it sounds like everyone agrees? So the Gemara answers no. It sounds like that, but really it's following the shita of Reb Meir. It's following the view of Reb Meir. Mi savris divrei hakoli. You think that statement is according to everyone? Seifa asan l'Reb Meir. The end of the Mishnah, we're going to explain that it goes according to Reb Meir, and Reb Meir is of the opinion that anything above four or above is considered invalid for schach, and therefore he says you can't sleep under that board that's 4. But according to Reb Yehuda, you actually could sleep under the board that's 4, according to the way Rav understands it, because he's of the opinion that we don't make this gezerah, we don't make this decree that's similar to the house. The Gemara now comes with another proof. And the first proof we weren't able to prove because we explained that the Mishnah, the second part of the Mishnah, is not according to everyone. It fits with one view in Rav's way of seeing it. So now comes the Gemara and brings a brisa. It says, Toshba, come in here. Shnei sadinim. If you have 2 sadinim, sheets, and 2 sheets, and sheets are makabel tumah. They're susceptible to tumah. You can't use for schach. And the thing is, it says mitzdarfin. They are going to join together. They're next to each other, and they will join together to reach this size of 4 handbreadths, and they will invalidate the sukkah. So they are mitzdarif. The 2 sheets are mitzdarif, mitzdarfin, and to reach a size of 4 handbreadths to make the sukkah puzzle, because you're using something that's invalid for schach, and it puzzles your sukkah, ruins your sukkah. Here we're talking about even in the middle of the sukkah, or specifically in the middle of the sukkah, it ruins your sukkah with the size of 4 handbreadths. So you have these 2 sheets that altogether add up to 4 handbreadths. That would ruin your sukkah. Now we turn the page. We're on 14b. Shnei nasarim. If you have 2 boards, ein mitzdarfin, they do not add up to invalidate your sukkah. And even if the entire sukkah would be with these boards, it would not invalidate your sukkah. And the understanding is that this would follow Reb Yehuda's view, and it's not a problem. This is so the Gemara now spells out the question. Reb Meir says af nisarim tisadinim, and Reb Meir would say that it would have the same rule. The beams, the boards, just like the sheets. So the first opinion we're going to say is we're going to understand as Reb Yehuda's view, and then comes Reb Meir's view, and he holds that these boards are problematic. So now we got to figure it out. We got to work it out. Got to work out the who this follow. How do you explain the case here? The Gemara says, Bishleima l'Shmuel, this goes good. It's understood according to Shmuel. Again, Shmuel was of the opinion that their argument is when it's less than 4, but more than 4 handbreadths, everyone agrees is invalid. So let's see. It's good according to Shmuel, the Amar, B'She'ein Behen Arba, Machlokes, that when there's less than 4, that's where there's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and the Reb Meir. Aval Yesh Behen Arba. But if it has 4 handbreadths, divrei hakoil psula, everyone agrees that it would be invalid. So the way we'll explain this brisa is talking about that there are these boards, and they have 3 handbreadths, let's say, but they don't have 4. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if it's 3 handbreadths, it's kosher for schach, and they don't join together to ruin your sukkah. Ein mitzdarfen, that the Brisa says they don't join together because you don't need it. There's no problem here. Each board is kosher. The boards are kosher for schach. They're 3 handbreadths, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's kosher for schach. And Reb Meir would be of the opinion that there would be a problem with these boards because they are invalid for schach, and it would ruin your sukkah. It's not kosher for schach, and of course they would join together to ruin your sukkah, which it needs to have kosher schach, and you're going to now have 4 handbreadths of non-kosher schach. So the Gemara says, my mitzdarfin, what does it mean when it says, Reb Meir's opinion, that you're joining these together, that nasarim are like sadinim, that the boards are similar to the sheets, and they join together. What do you need it to join together for? They're invalid, yeah, but they join together to invalidate the whole sukkah. They're mitzdarfin le'arba'a. They join together for 4 handbreadths that they will invalidate the sukkah because they are sukkah. They are schach puzzle. Again, if it's a schach puzzle, invalid schach, it would need to be a certain size in order to invalidate your sukkah. So you have like this interesting case here because Reb Meir says that when these boards are 3 handbreadths, they're invalid schach. Yeah, they're invalid schach, the 3 handbreadths, but 3 handbreadths doesn't invalidate a sukkah. So 3 handbreadths makes it invalid schach, but you would need it to be mitzdarif to join together with another board to make it invalid for to make it invalidate the sukkah, because you need 4 handbreadths to invalidate a sukkah. So it itself is called invalid schach. Now, if it itself was 4 handbreadths, then fine, then for sure it would invalidate the sukkah. But here it's only 3. It's 3 handbreadths, and it only fits according to Reb Meir that it's invalid schach. But how much do you need to invalidate your sukkah? You need 4. So it's mitzdaref. It joins together to make 4 to invalidate the sukkah. Now, so this would be the way Shmuel is learning the way Shmuel is learning this brisa. Elo Rav, but now let's pick Rav's view. So Rav now has to explain this brisa. How is he going to explain the brisa? The Rav the Amar b'sheyesh b'hen arba machlekes, that when you have 4 handbreadths, that's where there's an argument. If it doesn't have 4, everyone agrees it's kosher. Everyone agrees it's kosher. So these nasarim that you have, that they're not going to be, but that we seem to have an argument in the brisa. What's the case? So El Rav Damar. So Rav is going to say, well, how is he going to learn this? If it has 4 handbreadths, so lama lahu litzderufe. Why are you joining them together or not joining them together? Ein mitzdarfin. What are you joining them together? They're puzzle, right? And in Reb Meir, I should say, in Rabbi Yehuda, is a machlek. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that it needs to, that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that 4 handbreadths are puzzle schach. But in Reb Meir, what are you joining them together? If it doesn't have 4 handbreadths, then it's kosher schach. So why is it that you would join them together to passel the sukkah, to invalidate a sukkah, and make it similar to a sheet? These are kosher schach. They're just regular reeds and sticks. So the Gemara answers, li'olam, really, we could explain it, the isbahu arba, that each of these boards have the 4 handbreadths, and one of them alone will invalidate the sukkah. Umay mitzdarfin, what does it mean, mitzdarfin? It's mitzdarfin la'arba amais min hatzad. We're talking about that you're going to join them together to reach the size of Arba Amos, the 4 hand breadths on the side of a sukkah, which not cubits, excuse me, to 4 amos, 4 cubits on the side of the sukkah, and there the law of doifen akuma, the law of the bent wall, normally would apply, except that if you have 4 hand breadths, if it's 4 hand breadths or more, then it no longer applies, and therefore Reb Meir would say that they are mitzdaref, they will join together on the side of the sukkah to invalidate the sukkah. Now Reb Yehuda holds that there's no problem with these, and therefore there's no issue, and they'll never join together because these are kosher schach. He doesn't have any problem, even if they're 4 hand breadths or more, because this is kosher schach to use. So Reb Yehuda has no problem, and Reb Meir is going to have a problem, not in the middle of the sukkah. That's not the issue over here, because you wouldn't need them to join together for that. That itself would be a problem. One board alone would be a problem. But the concept of mitzdarfen would be, with the joining together would be on the side of the sukkah. There would be an issue, because the law of doifen akuma would normally kick in, except if it's more than 4 hand breadths, 4 cubits, then you no longer can use doifen akuma. So they'll join together to reach the size of 4 cubits. Okay, we're gonna have to stop here. Wish you a good day. This afternoon, everyone's invited to the 3 o'clock archaeology class, which is should be really interesting, especially apropos for before Tisha B'Av, to learn a little about Yerushalayim and some of the findings that they've found, interesting archaeological findings. It's the same link. Sei gesund, everyone. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Rabbi. Give me a chance to unmute and say goodbye to you. That's all.
Right.
Rabbi, what's the schedule?
And Rabbi, please remember to send me the link so I can be up to date. Okay. Thanks. Good.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Very good. Sure.
Bye-bye, everyone.
So Rabbi, what's the schedule? What's the schedule after this?
Oh, yeah. So we normally take a break after Tisha B'Av. I'm going to send out an email probably today. After Tisha B'Av, we're going to take a break till Elul. So people a little time, a little free.
So when is that? When is that starting next week? Which day?
Well, Tisha B'Av is Tuesday, Monday night and Tuesday. So we'll have class Monday morning, and probably not Monday afternoon. But I'll decide today if I'm going to do Monday afternoon or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.